Steve, I want to throw it over to you. You're interested in a veteran wide receiver here. How the tables have turned, my friend. What are you liking about Amari Cooper all the way down at ADP 156, wide receiver 67?
Yeah, I like that he could be in a new situation. Amari Cooper, I think, is hitting the free agent market currently. So there's nothing that's telling me, like, I mean, I know his time in Buffalo wasn't great, but it's not like he forgot how to play football or got like ridiculously old at the ripe old age of like 30. So I think there's still a year or two left in Amari Cooper to be at least a productive wide receiver, a wide receiver two, maybe. Like if he goes and signs somewhere like Baltimore or New England or something like that,
Yeah.
that's a really valuable landing spot for him at the 67th wide receiver. Do you know some of the guys that are going ahead of him? I mean, like it's like Jags. It's guys that Jags would look at and say, "You're a Jag." Like it's not good. Like I mean, Rashad Bateman's going ahead of him, and it's just ugly, ugly, ugly ahead of him. Amari Cooper still got it. I think he's still a good player. I think he'll be productive. I could see him going for 1,000 yards again next season easily.
Eric, where do you kind of land on Cooper here? Because I think we all had pretty high expectations, at least like mid wide receiver two expectations in Buffalo, and never ended up pushing even for a starting, role in that offense. Was a guy who would come in and definitely saw his handful of snaps, but Mac Hollins was still out there running the X quite a bit. We had Keon Coleman coming in, also taking a lot of valuable snaps from the X and the flanker position. So where do you kind of stay with Amari Cooper? Do you think he is washed, or do you think at wide receiver 67 currently you're willing to roll the dice that he lands in a good situation, like Steve said?
Yeah, legitimate open question as to Amari Cooper's capability heading into this upcoming season, right? Like I tend to err a little bit closer to Steve's side of the spectrum. That I think he's still got some gas in the tank, but I mean it's kind of wild to look back on the season and think about that trade to Buffalo. And at least with what we saw from Jameis Winston for a few weeks, he probably would have been more productive if he stayed in Cleveland, which was certainly not the sentiment when the deal was made. Look, going to that offense, it was just a logjam, right? It was the same reason why we were banging on Khalil Shakir for the entirety of the regular season. There were just so many mouths to feed. It was hard for anyone, including Amari Cooper, to establish any sort of meaningful role or snap count. I do think, drafting at this time of year, like you're trying to take advantage of uncertainty, right? Uncertainty breeds chaos, which breeds opportunity. This is a pretty thin wide receiver class in terms of free agency. So while he might not be the top prize for many teams out there, there are several wide receiver needy teams that might be looking at him as a plan B or plan C. So I would say it's more likely than not that he ends up in a situation where he's going to be a much bigger focal point. And so in turn, I think he presents pretty solid value sitting here at wide receiver 67.
Yeah, and while it's a deep NFL draft class at the receiver position, it's not a high-end draft at the position. Like, it's not a lot of guys that you can draft and get sure production in year number one. So, Steve, actually, at wide receiver 67, regardless of how Amari Cooper played this past year, I think it's worth a look. So, good call out there by you. Appreciate that one.